Sci-Spi.tv proudly presents Tricia McCannon's Modern Mystery School. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this very special episode featuring the host of Modern Mystery Schools on Sci-Spi.tv, Miss Tricia McCannon, a four-time best-selling author and also a host of sacred tours to temple sites around the world. She is a leading expert on the mystery schools, and I am so delighted to be here with her today. Welcome, Tricia.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And, I just got an opportunity to speak at one of your wonderful conferences. I think this one was called Beyond the Matrix, and it was terrific. It was in Sedona, and we had, a tour de force of wonderful speakers and pioneers for that whole weekend. So thanks so much for having me.
You are so welcome. It was truly an honor and a privilege to have you as a keynote at our fabulous event. It was a 2-day celebration of the spring equinox here in the Red Rock paradise of Sedona.
And we're trying to talk her into doing a fall version because it was so great and so beautifully received.
Absolutely. I will do my best. So we are here with Tricia today because she is an expert on the mystery schools and has dedicated decades of her life to research, and also as an intuitive with many past lives as temple priestesses. She has a profound understanding and extensive knowledge about the mystery schools, and that's why her show is called Modern Mystery Schools. Tricia, can you share with us a little bit about what inspired you to dive into the mystery schools decades ago?
Well, like I think a lot of us, I always was asking the deeper questions growing up. I grew up in the Deep South. I live in Atlanta, and although I have students all over the world that have studied in the Phoenix Fire Mystery School, the Order of the Eagle and the Dove, I was one of those people who didn't just accept answers carte blanche. Probably a lot of you know what I'm talking about. So, like in Sunday school when they were saying, there was Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Seth, their third son, I wanted to know who they married, if those were the only people on earth, which of course was not a very popular question for the Sunday school teacher. And so I was always asking the deeper questions. And because I was a clairvoyant, a seer, from the time I was a little girl, I could, see the devic energies in the forest, which are the nature spirits that are part of the guardian angels, if we will, of the natural world. And with people, sometimes I would look at them and be flooded with information about them, about their past or their future or their present. And other times I would try to see and I couldn't see. So I was spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to navigate the spiritual gifts that I had. And so when I was 19, a group of masters called the Vairagi Masters appeared to me. They're very sort of hidden, elusive group that really have, they come from the Far East and the Middle East, but the truth is there have been, Egyptian masters, Persian masters, American masters, Celtic masters. It's across the world. And these are people who have detached from the worldly ambition. They're not going for the big house or the Ferrari car or the job promotion. They're not going for the big bank account. They are kind of done with that. So they really are focused on the inner spiritual realms. And of course, this is a mystery school in itself. And what I needed and what they taught was the roadmap of the dimensions. And they also taught the ancient science of soul travel, which is the ability that every single soul has to learn to shift their consciousness while we're still living in the physical form, physical body, normal physical Clark Kent world, but we can learn to develop our abilities to travel in these inner realms. And of course, I was already doing that, but I had no roadmap. So at the age of 19, I was initiated. That was my first initiation. All during my 20s, as I graduated from Florida State University, came back to Atlanta where my family lived. became an art director, then opened my first commercial photography studio when I was 24. Started shooting for Macy's, IBM, Calvin Klein, Ralph Lauren, Coca-Cola. That was my straight Clark Kent life. But my inner life was all about cultivating this ability to shift my consciousness, meet with masters on the inner planes, go to the temples of wisdom, and be taught. And I never had an idea that I was going to set up a mystery school. I was just a student, a busy student, a pretty focused student. But then when I was about 31, I was in Stonehenge for the first time, and I had an angel appear to me, and he unsealed the Akashic records, which of course is the history of everyone's soul records in the world. And from that time on, I found, like I had graduated from about 11 years of study, I was in my third initiation at that time. I found that I could access the soul records of anybody that I met. And then of course I went on to get my fourth initiation and my fifth initiation. And from the fifth initiation, each one of these initiations is tied to a plane. So when you achieve your fifth initiation, you've learned to move beyond the fifth dimension up into the sixth and seventh dimension, which is they are more formless realms. The worlds of form are the fifth and the fourth and the third dimension. So I began working at an even higher level. You know, what happened with this mystery school, I never intended to set up this mystery school. But when I was 27, I was contacted by the priestesses of ISIS. I had no idea who they were, some strange Egyptian mystery cult, or, who knew? So, but they contacted me on the inner plane. I had a very powerful, one of those lucid, like it's real dreams, that I had gone back to school for my master's degree, okay, which is, it's so interesting how the higher self talks to us. And I was in a dorm room, and I woke up, and there was all this hieroglyphic, like extraterrestrial language on the walls. And I tried to remember it, but I fell back asleep. And when I woke up, the language was gone. But I remembered one symbol, and it was a circle with a dot at the center, which I was later to find out meant two things. It meant the sun, which is the center of all, center of our solar system. But it also meant the singularity, which is the dot at the center, God, the one, and the event horizon. This is the scientific version of that. God and everything that the divine created, okay? And so I didn't know that at the time, but when I woke up and I remembered that symbol, I thought, what does it mean? And suddenly I heard it is the beginning of all things and the end of all things. And so I wound up going to the library to try to find it, some reference to it. And while I was there, the student assistant came and got me and said, there's a phone call for you at the front desk. And I'm like, nobody even knows I'm here. How's that possible? So I went and picked up the phone, and I said, hello, who's this? And they said, is this Tricia McCannon? And I said, yes. And they said, we've called to tell you that your dreams are real. And I said, who's this?
Wow.
And she said, we're from the priestesses of ISIS, and that's all we're permitted to tell you at this time. And then she hung up. And so then I woke up, and it was a dream within a dream.
Ah, okay.
And I thought, who the heck are the priestesses of ISIS, and what do those symbols mean? And so, I was then on the quest to discover it. So about 2 months later, I was in the physical world, third dimensional here. I was going to have lunch at a little sushi restaurant, but they were packed, so I had to wait. And so to kill some time, I went to this beautiful gift shop called Illumina with thick carpets and gorgeous crystals and beautiful jewelry and great statues. And I'm looking at this Egyptian statue and thinking about my dream. And the woman behind the counter says, are you interested in Egyptian things? And I was like, yeah, I've been dreaming of the priestesses of ISIS.
And I saw all their symbols up here on my wall.
Right. And she said, well, tell me about your dreams. And I said, well, I don't think you're going to understand my dreams. I'm not even sure I understand them. And she said, try me. I'm a hierophant, which means a high initiate in the priestesses of ISIS.
Ah.
And I was 27 at this point. And I turned around, and this was really to become my shamanic teacher. And she invited me to her house. And so in my book, Return of the Divine Sophia, I tell this story. In fact, that's how that book starts.
Yes.
And I wound up going to her house, and it was a charming little house hidden in the woods with 4 little rooms, kind of like a cross, and the living room had nothing in it but altars, 2 aspects of the divine feminine. And of course my eyes were as big as saucers. I was like, holy schmoly, have I fallen into a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale or something, And I remember she had 11 white cats. I was like, that is a lot of cats, my goodness. And I spent the afternoon with her, and she took me down into the sacred grove where there were these altars set up to the north, south, east, and west, and to the center. And we spent the day together, and the things she said to me that day, they just completely shifted my reality. For example, most of us in the Judeo-Christian world have been taught that, man was created first. Hey, then God said he needs a companion. So he put Adam to sleep, and then we got the rib, and women, were created from the rib, and therefore they're subservient, and they're there to serve men. Well, what I discovered was, and I actually did the research on this, that all mammals are created biologically female. That the existence of the male is because the release of an additional androgen, so that the male is biologically a subset of the female. Well, this, of course, was like, what the heck? This is
That's not what we were taught in the patriarchal era.
Yeah, that was not what we were taught. So it became very clear to me by the end of that afternoon that my guides wanted me to study with Shasta. Shasta Zaring is still alive. She's still an amazing, very hidden, powerful, and wise spiritual teacher. But I was a scaredy cat. I grew up, my dad was Baptist, my mother was Methodist. We became Episcopalian, when I was like 10. And so I was already meditating, working with the Viragi masters. My family already thought I was out on the edge. And so I thought, oh my God, I can't go down this path. This is like just going to be too much.
Sorcery.
Yes, I know. It was like, too much.
Salem witches.
So, in fact, I even asked her, was she a witch? And she said, no, a witch is somebody who studies the Wiccan path. I study the path of the divine feminine, of the goddess. And so that made me feel a little better. But, I was still a scaredy cat. And so 5 years passed before I went back and said, I'm ready. And what happened was in my readings that I would do for people where I was tracking them back to their soul origins and their journey to bring them to earth and what their soul themes were, who their guides were, and so forth. Sometimes these sort of divine, I can only describe them as God goddesses with a little g, these presences would come in. And they would give me their names, their powers, their symbols. And later, I found them in this incredible 1,200-page book called The Encyclopedia of Myths and Women's Secrets, written by a woman named Barbara Walker, probably 1975, an extraordinary book. It's really a complete, highly footnoted compendium of knowledge that most of us know nothing about a time on the earth when God was considered to be the divine mother, the creator, or the divine mother and father, where men and women ruled together in a partnership model, and there was no war on the planet for thousands of years. Which, of course, we've grown up where we've known war for 3,000-4,000 years on this planet, and that we just assume that's going to have to be the way it always is. So this blew my mind, and so I became a student within the mystery schools, and I was trained in the Egyptian mysteries, the Celtic mysteries, the Native American twisted hair tradition, and of course I already had the esoteric teachings of the Viragi masters of the Far East and Middle East, and later, of course, I became trained in the esoteric Christian mysteries. And so for me, I bring all of those together in the Phoenix Fire Mystery School. Because, I think Jesus is awesome, and all these other masters also have had a role to play in different cultures and different ages and different times. So how the mystery school came to be born was that the great master Thoth from Egypt, the god of wisdom, also known as Hermes to the Greeks, appeared to me 3 times in a year and said, I want you to set up a mystery school. Well, I mean, this is, years and years into my initiations and study, but nonetheless, I was very daunted by this because I understand the profundity of what these schools are about. That there were people who had developed great spiritual gifts of invisibility, of levitation, the ability to walk through walls, telepathy, the ability to bilocate in two places. And they had, literally, I would say at least 100 people who were trained so that when an initiate went through their initiations, they already had the underground labyrinths, they had the temples, they really knew what to do. So I'm thinking, goodness gracious, I'm in the 20th century, how is this going to work? And so, or 21st century now. And so I thought, well, how am I going to do it? So then I took a whole nother year to really meditate on the structure and how to do it. And I decided to set it up as much as the ancients did. The ancients had 3 levels of initiation. So the first was dedicated to the divine feminine, the second to the divine masculine, and the third to the union or the mastery of the two, which allows the two sides of the brain to synchronize. It allows the third eye to open and the inner senses to come online with the balance between logic and intuition, between emotion and mental analysis, between creativity and a logic or discernment. And so that's what happened. And this was over 14 years ago. And I had, for many years, I taught in person. And I would only take maybe 14, 16, 18 students at a time.
And this would be the Phoenix Fire Mystery School?
Exactly. And and I would, meantime, people would, call and write me from everywhere because they had read my books and they were like, do you have this school online? And of course, for years I had to say, no, sorry. And finally, about the 4th or 5th time that I taught it, I took the time to create what were initially 40-page, 60-page, 75-page weekend teaching curriculums into 100 to 180-page, with a table of contents, an introduction, processes and exercises.
Like a workbook.
A workbook, exactly. And I have 12 of those online. And so now I have students in every place from Germany, Dubai, Canada, San Francisco, New York, Switzerland. It's really wonderful. And I'm actually thinking about launching a level of the program. And of course, this Modern Day Mystery School is one of the venues through which we can begin to teach people online. I've created some wonderful online programs the last year or two through Sacred Stories Media, which you can find on my website, TriciaMcCannonSpeaks.com. Those are about the Egyptian mysteries, the Mary Magdalene and the Holy Grail. But, because I'm a clairvoyant, I'm a seer, and I'm a hermeticist, which is the symbol language of the soul that the ancients encoded this information into, that allows you to have the keys to open up these vast storehouses of knowledge that are contained in the inner realms. That's what hermetics does. It's phenomenal. And that's why it's literally the second class in the 12 classes of the written mystery school. I have found that by teaching with PowerPoint presentations, for example, at your conference, I spoke, for 2 hours where I just condensed an enormous amount of information. And what happens is it activates people's souls. It's like the soul has a remembrance that when the pieces are laid out, suddenly there's an activation and an up-leveling, a vibrational remembrance from the soul level and a download that comes into them that allows them to claim more of who they really are. And so that's always very exciting for me. I see it many times will happen with a reading, but particularly in the study of the great spiritual mysteries, which understood at a core level that we are all divine beings that have the spark of God within us, that we are in earth school down here, and that we're in a course curriculum, and most of us don't know we're in a course curriculum. But every day we have an opportunity. Do we choose fear or love? Do we choose kindness or cruelty? Do we choose patience or impatience? Do we choose de-evolution or evolution? And this every morning we wake up, we get to make those choices again and again. And the combined group of those choices, even if we've gone through a bad patch, if we remember who we are and get back on that path of being true to our highest self and living in alignment with that, remarkable miracles can happen in our lives. And that's what the mystery schools were always about. And that's why I'm teaching the mysteries today, is because it's time for it to come forward once again.
Well, we are so very grateful to you for sharing this profound knowledge, these really valuable teachings that can benefit our lives in so many positive, powerful ways, Tricia. So thank you and many blessings.
Thanks for joining us.
Please tune in to Tricia McCannon's Modern Mystery School by subscribing to Sci-Spi.tv.